Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's summit, Microsoft 365, a look ahead to 2022. This event was organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine, who have brought together some of the best independent experts on today's topic. Many thanks to our four sponsors, Metallic, CoreView, Spanning, and Manage Engine for making this event possible. I'm sorry, that was Core Review. I'm going to get that right. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of Application Development Trends, and I'll be your moderator for the first of three information-packed sessions. But before we get started, I need to go over a few housekeeping details. Each of today's sessions is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way within the next few days. Each of today's sessions will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. You can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. Please feel free to add your questions as they occur to you throughout the summit. We'll do our very best to get to all of them. Our sponsors have provided some extra resources that can be found on the right-hand side of the screen. Please take a moment to check those out. As you leave the summit today, you'll be asked to take a very short survey. Please take a moment to share your thoughts and opinions on how we're doing. The editors actually read the comments, and they do help to shape our future events. And last but not least, at the end of the second session, one lucky attendee will be receiving a pair of Bose noise-canceling headphones, but you must be present to win, so stick with us. Now let's get started with our first session, What's New in Microsoft 365, Top Features You Might Have Missed. For this session, we've called on Nathan O'Brien, a Microsoft Certified Solutions Master in Messaging and a Microsoft MVP for Office Servers and Services. As an independent consultant at MCSM Lab, Mr. O'Brien has worked extensively with Office 365, Exchange, Azure, Active Directory, and other Microsoft technologies. He's a 5-time Microsoft MVP, and he actively contributes to the Exchange and Office 365 communities by writing articles for a range of technology websites, not to mention his own must-read blog. You're in for a great session. Take it away, Nathan.
Thank you very much, John, and welcome, everyone. Glad you could all join us today. Looks like we have a pretty good group of attendees here this morning, or afternoon, I guess, if you're on the East Coast. As John said, I am Nathan O'Brien. I'm going to be talking about some new features here in Microsoft 365 that I found interesting. I thought I'd bring up for you today. We have these 5 topics that I'm going to touch on today. As I go through it, if anyone in the audience has any questions, please feel free to put those in the little Q&A question box you have there at the bottom of your screen. John and I will make every effort to get to those kind of at the end of this session here as we wrap things up. I'm going to try and talk till about quarter till, then we'll go to the questions, but we'll see how that all works out doing that. So these 5 topics I'm going to talk about, Loop, the Microsoft Authenticator, the Exchange Mitigation Service, some networking changes coming to Microsoft 365, and we're going to talk a little bit about conditional access as well. So hopefully you find these all interesting. These are new features that I found, and I thought I'd like to share with you today. So if we're ready, let's get into it. So first one I wanted to talk about is Loop, or Microsoft Loop, or Teams Loop. Feature's still in preview, and as Microsoft loves to change the names of things, I'm not entirely sure what it'll end up being called. But Loop is a new app or feature or set of features, I guess, that allows users to collaborate and work simultaneously in real time on the same canvas with kind of portable components that move across applications in the Office stack. I think that's the first thing we really want to emphasize when I start talking about Loop here, is that although it kind of starts off as a Teams feature, and we're going to show you how that all works, Loop these live components in Loop are saved as files in the OneDrive for the person who creates them, and then you can also put them into other applications in the Office stack. So you can kind of create this live component in Teams and then, say, email it around, and it will still show up as a live component in people's Outlook or you can paste a loop component kind of into Word or OneNote. So that should be kind of interesting. See how that all works out. It's kind of a lot like that live editing feature that came out to SharePoint and OneDrive a little while ago, where you could, co-author a Word document or Excel document with multiple people at the same time, and see those updates to those documents in real time. Loop will work like that. These Loop components are available in one-on-one chats and group chats for users inside the same organization. They don't currently work across organization, so it's all within one organization, and they don't currently work in the chat that's in a specific team. It has to be in a kind of that one-on-one chat or that group chat situation. I assume much of that will change as this feature set kind of advances and grows, but it's hard to tell. And then if you wanted to play with these Loop components, this live components, down there at the bottom of the screen, there's some instructions on how you can access those within your own tenant in Teams right now with the developer preview. Click on those little menu at the top next to your picture, the little three buttons. Go to About, Developer Preview, turn it on, and then you'll see a little P on your icon that indicates you are using the developer preview, and then you'll have access to these Loop components. I wanted to show you here on the left-hand side of the screen. I believe that's what you'll see if you activate that developer preview today. Kind of at the bottom of a one-on-one or a group chat, you'll see that little icon that I'm pointing to, and the red arrow pointing to on the left there. That's the old Loop icon, or the current Loop icon. What I saw in documentation for this feature when I was looking for it is all that icon there. On the right-hand side of the screen, when I was creating this slide deck, playing around in my tenant on Monday of this week, I have a little different icon in my tenant. My Teams tenant is in the beta, so I guess mine's a little bit ahead of where everybody else. You'll see also they kind of changed the name of it there from Live Components on the left to Loop Components on the right. They added at least one new one, the agenda there. So again, this is a new feature that's not fully out. Hasn't reached that general availability yet, so expect things to change and look a little bit differently as you play with it and go forward. Just wanted to show what that looks like there. All right. Next thing I wanted to talk about is kind of permissions for these components. When you create one of these components in Teams, as you can see there, you can see right where the arrow is pointing, people in your organization with link and edit. If you click on that, it brings up the box just to the right of that, says the settings for that. You can control permissions of who will have access to these components. At the top, anyone with a link is grayed out. Again, that's because this is only available within a single tenant right now. Again, that may change in the future. We'll know. We'll see. And then it kind of defaults to people in your organization with the link, but you can change the permissions on who has access to this component, and that might be important. If you create one of these within a one-on-one chat or a group chat, and then you later want to share it out to other people, you can change the permissions there for it so that other people may have access to it. And of course, you can allow people to edit it with that. When you go ahead and click on okay. So this is kind of a screenshot of what one of these components look like. Obviously, I can't show you the kind of liveness of this right now in screenshots on a PowerPoint deck, but this will show up in your Teams chat when you create one of these components. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, anybody who's in that chat can access each of these parts of it and make the edits on it live in real time, and everybody will see that. So this one is a project tasks loop component here that I put in. And, so if you're having a meeting and you kind of want to go over the tasks for your project, you can update these live in real time. That's how that all works there. If you go ahead and click on the project tasks, that blue link that's in the upper left-hand corner there, that will take you to something that looks like this. Takes you to your OneDrive folder, where you can see that loop component, that live component, is actually saved as a .fluid file in your OneDrive. Then you can use that file again to share it out to other people, attach it to an email, put it in a Word document, that sort of stuff, again, as I said. And that does remain as a live component in those other Office applications, as long as the person editing it is logged into Office 365 and has that access to it. So I think that's kind of a nifty feature of these loop components, kind of that live collaborative setup on these that Microsoft is always going for, finding new ways for people to engage and kind of live communicate, keep that sort of Office level of communication between people when you're not necessarily in the same office together. So I find that to be a pretty handy little bit of feature there that's newly coming to your Office 365. Here, right at the top of the link there, is a 13-minute session that Microsoft kind of introduced Loop there at Ignite a couple months ago. So you can go ahead and watch that little 13-minute video. It will tell you more about Loop, what it is, how it all works. Not all the features that are available, that are covered in that video, were available in my tenant, either as a developer preview or in my beta tenant. So obviously Microsoft has other aspects of this that they are working on that haven't, reached that dissemination yet, that people won't have access to. So just be aware of that if you want to play with this feature, that you might see different versions, different features available as time goes on. Right there in the middle of the screen, you can see there's a screenshot of my picture from Teams. My Teams client is in the beta, or my Teams deployment, I guess, the whole thing is in the beta there. But if you go to that developer preview, you'll see a little P there where it says beta on my picture, kind of showing you that you're using the developer preview version of that. As I've said, these Loop components do work across other Office applications. So that's really handy. They do work both in the FAT clients, the regularly installed Office Pro Plus version of Office clients that would be installed on your computer, or in the web clients. And as I said, they're stored in OneDrive, and you can access them and share them around that way. So I think that's kind of a handy new feature that come into Office 365 for you all. And if anybody has any questions about that one, go ahead, put them in the chat, and then we'll try and answer those as we get to the end here. All right, moving ahead to the next feature I wanted to talk about. Some updates to the Microsoft Authenticator app that I thought were really interesting, and how that app works with Microsoft 365. First thing that I want to say on this is 99+% of the compromised accounts that Microsoft finds in Office 365 just have the single authentication. They don't have multi-factor authentication turned on. That's people just logging in with username and password. Every time I talk to customers about Office 365 security, I always strongly stress that. I want to make sure everybody understands that Office 365, to keep that secure, you really need to be using multi-factor authentication. And every Office 365 account does have at least some level of multi-factor authentication available to it, no matter the licensing level that you have. You may not have access to all the features that I'm going to talk about here, depending on your Azure Active Directory licensing, that free level of Azure Active Directory, or P1 or P2. You might see different features available depending on your licensing level, but there is at least some level of multi-factor authentication available for free in every Office 365 account. Highly recommend everybody use those. Then when we start talking about multi-factor authentication, I also want to stress that, not all multi-factor authentication is created equal. There are different sorts of, different second factors that you can use for that multi-factor authentication, and some of them are more secure than others. Specifically, using an authenticator app is better than using just those SMS text messages or a direct phone call. You don't have to do too much research there to figure out there are a number of different exploits where SMS, those text messages or those phone calls kind of can be taken and spoofed, SIM card spoofing and a couple of other different attacks that can be used there that make those other methods less secure. So I always want to tell customers, use an authenticator app if you can as the second factor for your multi-factor authentication there. It is much more secure to be using an authenticator app. Now, you don't have to use Microsoft Authenticator. There's Google has their own authenticator. You can use Google Authenticator. It works just fine with Office 365. LastPass is a password vault that I use. They have their own authenticator app. I'm sure there are many other different authenticator apps, and they all work just fine with Office 365. But, these three features that I'm going to talk about that are new to the Microsoft Authenticator app, in my opinion, they kind of put Microsoft Authenticator ahead as a more secure option than using something like Google Authenticator or one of the other authenticator apps. So again, use multi-factor authentication, use an authenticator app, and then now I think there's a good reason to use the Microsoft Authenticator app. These next three features that we're going to talk about, new to Microsoft Authenticator, really make that Microsoft Authenticator more secure and better for you to use. So those three features are: the first one, Microsoft can prevent accidental approvals in Microsoft Authenticator, or admins can prevent those kind of accidental approvals with number matching. What that is I'm sure you've all seen when you get that multi-factor authentication request in an authenticator app, it's pretty easy to just automatically hit approve. And I'm sure that users do that far too much. Users just get used to hitting approve for those, authentication attempts. They don't necessarily pay a ton of attention to them. So the first feature here, when you authenticate into Office 365, turn on this feature. Your authenticator app will come up with a number on the application that you're trying to authenticate with, and you have to enter that number from the screen onto your phone in the authenticator app, kind of a double verification that you are the person who's authenticating in, and you have to make sure that you're actively, the one doing this, and you're not, somebody else isn't trying to get into your account. You're just multi-factor authenticator approving somebody else to get into your account for you. So that kind of helps users pay a little bit more attention to that authentication flow. Second one is admins can set up GPS location-based conditional access policies while using the multi-factor authentication. So we can kind of geofence our users now. So, if you want to ensure that somebody is, logging into Office 365 from within just the United States, you can set up your authenticator so that it reads the GPS information from your phone and verifies where that phone is located. Just the United States is a good, fencing to that, so that the person who's authenticating has to be within the United States. Of course, conditional access, there are ways to already do that with conditional access, but this adds in that second factor has to be within the U.S. So you can use conditional access to ensure that people are authenticating from an approved IP address that would be, geo-mapped to a specific location. But now the authenticator app itself can use a GPS on your phone to verify that it's not authenticating from, China or Russia or somewhere. As a further improvement to that multi-factor authentication. And then the last new feature I'm going to show you is users or admins can nudge their users to use the Authenticator app when they're setting up MFA. So where this comes in handy is, again, as I said, you don't really want your users using that SMS feature for MFA authentications. You don't want them to receive that text message or receive a phone call. That's not as secure as using the Authenticator app. But in many organizations I work with, it's not necessarily a viable option to force everybody to use an Authenticator app. So you do have to make those other methods available to them. When you turn on this nudge, then it's, kind of politely reminds the users that, hey, you are using SMS for your second factor authentication. Probably you should set up an Authenticator app to make that a little bit more secure. So let's look at these three features here. Moving forward. First one, number matching in the Authenticator experience. It's in public preview. And up there on the screen, you can see I took a screenshot of my Azure Active Directory. Went into security and then authentication methods. And I'm going to kind of cut off the bottom there of my screenshot. But there's, on this screen, there's a little configure button that you can go to, and we'll show you what that looks like, I believe, on the next slide or one or two slides down, where you can turn on these features. So that's how you get to turning on these features within your Azure Active Directory. Go to portal.azure.com, Azure Active Directory, then you go into Azure Active Directory for your tenant security, authentication methods, and then you can configure these methods. Yeah, this is a screenshot of that, configuring these additional new features in MFA authentication. The Authenticator approval requests, you can see right there. You can require the number matching, enable that, and then show additional context in notifications preview. That's also enabled here in my tenant. So those two features, that's how you turn them on there. Next one, this is a screenshot from my phone as I was authenticating into Office 365 after I turned on those features. You can see this is from within the Authenticator app, and then it verifies, I authenticated, logged on to the website, portal.office.com or whatever, got that Authenticator app pop up on my phone, open it up, and I can see that I am trying to authenticate from Portland. That's where my workstation was assigned via the IP address, so that they both match up, and I can see that from here it's not somebody from China trying to authenticate into my Office 365 tenant. Also gives you other information about, who's authenticating, what application you're authenticating into. I think I was Exchange Online PowerShell, I guess, is what I was doing when I tried to authenticate into this one. Showed me there in Portland, and then again, it had the number up on the screen that I had to type here into the app to verify that it's really me, that I'm the one doing this authentication, make that more secure. Always super important. A lot of organizations are really, interested in this, in keeping their Office 365 secure, compliance problems, make sure everything's good and safe. So that's what this is for. Always a good idea. GPS-based named locations. So again, within the Authenticator setup, you can see I have conditional access set up so that you can only log into my Office 365 tenant from within the United States currently. I don't really travel out of the U.S. much. Certainly I live and work here, so I have mine set up so that you can only authenticate into my tenant from within the U.S. It's configured here. And then, of course, you can see here this additional feature, this GPS-based named locations, makes it so that my Authenticator app also has to be run from within the U.S. to get me in. Ensures the integrity of GPS location. It does deny access if the device is jailbroken or rooted. So if you do set this up, you want to warn your users if they're using jailbroken or rooted phones, this won't work. And then the registration campaign, kind of the last screenshot I had on this to show you. This is the little nudge screen. I think I took this one from a Microsoft website. It kind of shows that pop-up there when you do sign in with like an SMS or a phone call as that second factor in your authentication. Gives you a little pop-up that says, hey, good job logging on with MFA, but it could be a little bit more secure. Why don't you go ahead and set up the Authenticator app? And of course, you can click there, and it'll walk you through that process of downloading and setting up that app for you. Makes it pretty seamless, easy for users to get into an Authenticator app. And as I said, I think now with these new features, the Authenticator app itself is probably, or the Microsoft Authenticator app is probably more secure than using something like Google Authenticator. That's a nice new feature there. Let's keep moving on through this. We've got a few more to cover before we get to questions. Yep. Exchange Server Emergency Mitigation. So I put this new feature here on the list. It's not strictly a Microsoft 365 feature. It's really more of an on-premises Exchange feature. But I included it because pretty much, or most of the customers that are using Exchange Online with their Office 365, they're syncing their on-premises Active Directory into Azure Active Directory and using those shared identities like that. When you set up and do that, the only supported method that Microsoft uses to modify those Exchange attributes in your on-premises Active Directory is currently Exchange Server. I know customers are not a huge fan of this. It's been an issue for many years that you make that move to Office 365 to Exchange Online. You get everybody's mailbox up in the cloud, but you still have to maintain that Exchange Server on premises. And many customers feel that's a kind of a security hole, having that Exchange Server on premises. And I agree, it's another server that you have to maintain on premises and keep secure. So this emergency mitigation service, emergency server mitigation service, is a new way that Microsoft has rolled out to keep those Exchange servers updated when they have zero-day exploits. So an exploit that comes out that's Microsoft has found the exploit and it's a new exploit, but they won't have the updated CU ready for your Exchange server for some time yet. The emergency mitigation service can be set up and used to automatically patch those servers for you in the background to mitigate new threats. This is available in the September 21 CUs for all current versions of Exchange. Do have to include in that Exchange 2010 is not a current version of Exchange. It is out of support. Still see a lot of Exchange 2010 servers out there. I don't believe this feature is available on Exchange 2010. It's no longer supported. Didn't get that update. But in the current September 2021 CUs for Exchange 2013 and above, this feature is available. It's optional for customers who want Microsoft to create and automatically deploy vulnerability mitigations for the Exchange servers. It is enabled by default. So if you install a CU on your on-premises Exchange server after September 21, this will be enabled by default. Everybody needs to be aware of that so that your Exchange server might start doing stuff without you knowing about it. It runs checks every hour. Does require IIS URL rewrite, that feature, to be enabled. If any of you have run an Exchange CU update after this came out, you might have seen that. An error pop up when you try to run your CU. It says that IIS URL rewrite needs to be enabled. That is for this feature. Actions are performed via that IIS URL rewrite. You can start and stop app pools, services, change authentication settings, and modify other configuration settings. Microsoft doesn't really explain what those other mitigation, or those other settings that Exchange can update. But you should assume that really Microsoft can change any feature within your on-premises Exchange server if you have this on. So again, patches for Microsoft, not always 100% tested. Sometimes problems do happen. Sometimes, an update or a patch will be applied that will cause issues for customers. If you are concerned about that, you will need to turn off this Exchange Server emergency mitigation service, so that your stuff isn't turned off on your Exchange Server automatically. Of course, again, Microsoft will hopefully only do that if there's a dire need for that, and those updates will be well tested before they roll out. We always like to think that's the case, but we have seen, I'm sure everybody's seen, bad patches from Microsoft come out that have caused more problems than they've done good for you. So be aware of that. Know that if you have that on-premises Exchange server, it's updated to current, a new exploit could come out for Exchange Server that Microsoft will start making changes to your on-premises Exchange server, really without you doing anything on it. And that may cause problems. Certainly, the goal here is that it keeps you safer, but be aware of that. Understand how that's all working. All right, enough of that one. Next new feature I wanted to talk about is Microsoft 365 Informed Network Routing. So Microsoft is making some changes to how routing connections to Microsoft 365 work. This new feature is currently only available for customers who are using Cisco iOS XE SD-WAN applications. I am absolutely not a networking guru, so I wanted to bring this up and mention it, but I want to put that caveat on here. I certainly don't understand Cisco routers and switches very much at all, but if you do have a Cisco router and switch set up, use Cisco equipment for your networking, and you have that XE SD-WAN feature, those routers will now be able to make more intelligent routing decisions about your organization's connection to Office 365 and Microsoft 365 for you, and help improve that network connection quality. Microsoft generally finds that when customers have network issues with Microsoft 365, those issues exist either within the customer's network or between the customer's network and where Microsoft takes over that network connection. Microsoft does see that happen. I've had cases opened with Microsoft where we've had to work through that, and we figured out where the problem was. This new feature will kind of allow your routers and switches to route traffic differently based on how that connection is working, how you're getting into Microsoft's network. This feature doesn't change how traffic flows once it gets inside of Microsoft's network, though. Microsoft's already on that, and they're controlling that for you. So currently how this kind of network health checking works, and again, I'm definitely not a networking expert, so I'm going to go real high level on this, but that connection between your routers and Microsoft at the endpoint can be kind of monitored with ICMP probes. See if the traffic is reaching its destination in a timely manner, that sort of stuff. It's a generalized probe that kind of will control the overall connection between you and Microsoft, but doesn't get into application specifics or that sort of stuff. So this new feature, it's kind of a yes or no signal that the data center is reachable. This new feature does include application-specific metrics. So your routers and your switches will be able to make routing decisions based on the availability of specific applications within Microsoft. Hopefully you're all aware that every Microsoft service doesn't run out of every Microsoft data center. So your services can move between Microsoft data centers as well. So if you have an Office 365 tenant here in the U.S., I believe there's 12 or so data centers here in the U.S. Your Exchange mailbox might be in one data center, and it might be connecting to a different data center for Teams. Routing decisions with this new feature, the routers kind of optimize those connections between you and Microsoft to ensure that every user's experience works as well as it possibly can. Can detect problems with the routers and change the way that traffic moves to other links to make the applications more responsive. Hopefully that all makes sense. And again, that is limited currently to those Cisco devices with that software that I talked about earlier. But if you have that, maybe looking to turning that on, you can make your Office 365 connections a little better. All right. Next one we wanted to talk about here, the last few minutes we have before we switch to questions and answers, conditional access. So there are some new features for conditional access. Conditional access is a feature within Azure Active Directory that allows you, assuming you have at least an Azure P1 license for your users, it allows you to control that authentication flow to add additional steps to it or have that authentication flow work differently in different situations. So kind of some examples of how that can work differently is maybe your users don't have to use multi-factor authentication every time they authenticate, but someone with admin rights does have to. Or if you log on from the office, you have a different authentication flow than if you log on from home. Conditional access allows that sort of scenario to take place. And then we're going to talk about a couple of new features within conditional access here to really improve that. First one is templates. So Microsoft identified kind of the 14 most popular uses for conditional access and pre-built templates for you and put that into the conditional access portal in Azure Active Directory so that it's easier to set up conditional access policies. You can go into conditional access, kind of review those templates and see if any of them fit needs for your organization, and then improve that authentication flow for how your organization logs in. I know they're not super easy to read on the screen there, but you can see there's a bunch of different, 14 different conditional access templates that you can use are set up there in the portal for you. Conditional access overview dashboard. So one of the real difficulties I see with conditional access, setting it up for customers and getting it to go, is it's really hard to kind of understand what's happening for specific users as they go through that conditional access flow. Historically, you turn on conditional access, it can be difficult to ensure that the users are going through the right flow, that the result for the user is what you intended when you can set that up. This conditional access overview board gives you more information about how the users are logging on, what conditions they're going through, when MFA is triggered for them, or how that authentication flow works for specific users in specific authentication scenarios. So this new dashboard gives you more insight into how that conditional access is working for specific users or apps or devices within your policy set up in Microsoft 365. And then kind of the last feature I wanted to talk about, Microsoft has just added conditional access filters for devices. So you can change the authentication flow for users based on what device they are using. I think the biggest use case for this is going to be situations where, say you want, you have really important data that's stored in a SharePoint site, and you want to make sure that data is only available to users who log on from a specific device. You have one secure device that's located in your office. This is the only place that you want people to be able to authenticate this specific SharePoint site or a specific collection or maybe a highly privileged email account, something like that. You can now use conditional access to put device filters on there so that you can say, if you're authenticating into this specific app, into this specific place in Microsoft 365, that has to be done from a specific device. You can also add additional, flows in there for, say, if somebody doesn't have a device that's registered in Intune and it's secured that way, you can put additional hoops they have to jump through there, or limit their access to parts of your Office 365 tenant based on the device that they're authenticating into. So it's another neat new feature. I think that will make life a lot easier for administrators and help us all secure our Office 365 deployments. All right, with that, I think we can move into the question and answer. Looks like we do have a number of questions in the portal. So, John, you see anything interesting that we want to get into?
We do have one or two. Okay, let's see. I'm not even sure where to start here. Maybe we'll just start with this one from Marisol. What if we don't see developer preview in the About menu? Does this have to do with licensing, or is there a setting that must be turned on?
I believe so. Within your Teams client, if you launch your Teams client, up in the upper right-hand corner where you see your picture, there's those three dots. If you click those three dots, you should be able to go down to About and then select Developer Preview, which will enable those loop features for you. I believe that's available for everybody. As far as I know, you should be able to turn that on and get those loop components. Pretty much everybody right now should be able to access those in the Developer Preview for Teams, as far as I'm aware. I did try a few different tenants myself, and that was always available to me, so I think that should be available for you. If it's not, it may be possible to disable the Developer Preview within the admin settings of Office 365 or Microsoft 365. So if it's not available for you, I would think that would be because one of your administrators has gone and disabled your access to the Developer Preview. I think that's probably most likely explanation there.
Okay. Satish Kumar asks, can we use Microsoft Loop in SharePoint Online?
Yes, absolutely you can. So those loop components, currently the only way to create those live components or loop components or whatever they're called, currently the only way to create them is within Teams. Again, you go into Teams, hit that little button I showed you, whichever icon you see, and then start that component there. But once you start that component, it does save that .fluid file in a folder in your OneDrive folder. So the person who creates that, there is a folder in OneDrive. I'm actually looking right now at mine for what the name of that folder is. It is Microsoft Teams chat files. So if you go into your OneDrive after you've created one of those loop components, and you will see a new folder called Microsoft Teams chat files, and then there are .fluid, .fluid files that it creates. That is that live loop component. You can then link that component from SharePoint Online, OneDrive Online. They also work in Word, Outlook, OneNote, those things. So if you link that component into any of those other Office features, yes, it will still work as a live component from there.
Okay. Larry is wondering, is this GPS authenticator available now?
Yes, that GPS authenticator is absolutely available now. You don't have to have any sort of preview turned on. Again, as I showed you, if you go into that authentication settings under Security in your Azure Active Directory, you can enable those features. As I showed you that screenshot, that is available for everybody right now. They are in two of the features I talked about are in preview, and then one of them is newly available in general availability. So they are available for everybody right now. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Ash wants to know, can you geofence a state or city instead of just a country?
I believe right now I have only been able to do it at the country level. I didn't see anything in there that would allow you to set it up automatically to the state or city that specificity. I do believe that Microsoft will improve that over time, and you will have the ability to shrink that area. That you can geofence those authenticator accept buttons too, but for now it's really just limited to the country. However, you do see, as I showed in that screenshot, a map in your authenticator app of where you're authenticating from. That map that it shows you is actually where your client is authenticating from, not the geolocation of your phone. But you want to make sure, obviously, that those match up, that what it's showing you on the screen is where you currently are, hopefully at your computer authenticating in there. So you want to make sure those all match up, and then you know that you are authenticating a session for yourself and not for somebody who's spoofed you in some way.
Fascinating. Okay. Jacob wants to know, what happens if you have live components available and you try to use them with someone who doesn't have that update in their Teams client yet?
I believe the answer is it depends. So I know I played with this a little bit over the last week. I created a live loop component in one tenant and sent it to my own account that was in another Office 365 tenant. Wasn't able to open it all or do anything with it. So across tenant, it doesn't do anything useful at all. I did try somebody who hadn't turned on the developer preview, and I created a one-on-one chat with another user who hadn't turned on the developer preview. They were able to see it and interact with it, but they couldn't create their own. So there's a little bit different experience, but it only works within a single tenant. And then people who haven't turned on that developer preview can see and interact with your loops that you create within your own tenant, but they can't create their own. Hopefully that answers that.
Okay, boy, we have a lot of questions this time around. Okay, let me look here. Charles is wondering, how do you get developer preview also in a government instance of 0365? I'm not, Office 365.
Yeah, so the GCC and GCC High Office 365 tenants tend to lag a little bit behind the standard Office 365 tenants with new features. So that may not be available to you if you are in a GCC or a GCC High Office 365 tenant. I only tested it with my tenant that's in the Teams beta, and then a couple other tenants that are just standard, normal Office 365 tenants in the U.S.
So, Brian, we lost you there for a couple of seconds.
Oh, sorry about that.
But it was just at the start of your answer, so if you just want to repeat it, I think we'll be good.
Sure. So I guess the short version of what I said is I only tested it with standard Office 365 tenants. I didn't test it with government tenants, but the government tenants tend to lag a little bit behind on these new features. So I'm sure it will be available eventually, but not yet.
Okay. Jason wonders, technology is great, huh? Jason wonders, is there going to be an authenticator app in the Microsoft Store?
In the Microsoft Store. So I assume that means like in the Windows 10 or Windows 11 store for PCs. And the answer there is no. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense, I don't think, because if you're logging on with your PC, you want your multi-factor to be, your multi-factor authentication to be from another device, not your same computer. So no, the Authenticator app is available in the Windows or in the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. Mm-hmm. I assume it's available on Windows Phone. Not that there's anybody that actually uses that nonsense, but no, it's not available for PCs.
Okay, Chad has a kind of a big question here. He's wondering. He says, "I'm only an Azure AD P1 customer, using it for identity services. Can I safely disable access to various Microsoft 365 apps and services such as Office, Teams, OneDrive, etc., without breaking guest access to Teams meetings for my users? I want to decrease our exposure."
Okay, so yeah, that's a big question. There's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, there are, I believe, 3 different versions of the Azure Active Directory license. There's the Azure Active Directory Free, which is what you get with a standard Office 365 E3 license that doesn't include all these controls. And then there's P1 and P2. I am not entirely sure what license stacks each of the P1 and P2 is available in. But with Azure Active Directory P1, you would have, I believe, all the features that we talked about here. But you talked about guest access. So guests authenticating into your tenant, they're not going to have a license at all, but they will use the features of for the most part, they use the features of the licenses that you have available in your tenant. But guest access can be a little tricky, and it kind of varies app to app. And then kind of the root of the question was, can I disable features and have everything still work for guests? It's a really hard scenario to kind of walk through in my head. I guess it depends on what you're disabling. You can kind of control guest access, what the guest accounts have access to a bit within Teams, but disabling features and how that's going to affect the guest access, I think those controls are mostly just for guest access. Enable guests and allow guests to be invited to things. Not sure I can entirely answer that question the way it was asked. I think there's a little bit too much in one question to answer all the different parts of that. But I think, test it out, I guess, is the short answer.
Chad just followed up with my users' guest access to other tenants is what he's trying to say.
Okay, so your users' guest access to other tenants, you can't control at all. That's, in the other tenants. That's the administrators of the other tenants. It's up to them. So, no, you can't control that at all.
Okay. So Jason wonders, if you're using MFA without Authenticator app, the Authenticator app, is it hard to switch over?
No, actually, it is not hard to switch over at all. So when you turn on MFA for a user, depending on your licensing level, I believe that even at the free licensing level, you have the option to have either SMS, phone authentication, or Authenticator app authentication. I believe that's available, and you as the administrator can enable or disable any of those authentication methods for your users at any time. I always recommend that you only enable that Authenticator app, but there are situations where somebody's not going to have a cell phone, or a cell phone doesn't work, inside your building, that sort of stuff, where you have to enable, the landline authenticator. So yes, you can control that at any time, and that's part of the MFA setup. If you go into your Office 365 admin portal, just search for MFA. It will take you to the setup portal for MFA, and then you can control any of those 3 authentication methods at any time with a simple checkbox.
Okay. So Robert is wondering, is the enhanced authenticator available in GCC High? That's the Microsoft 365 Government Community Cloud High licensing, right?
Yeah, that's the highly secure government tenants, and I don't know. I don't have one of those tenants that I can play with. I do have a few customers. I've worked with them. I can tell you that new features to Microsoft 365 tend to be pretty slow getting to those GCC High tenants. So I doubt that anything that we've talked about today would be available in a GCC High tenant.
So this is interesting. Jeff is wondering, wouldn't things like NordVPN break GPS authentication?
No. No, they won't, because that GPS authentication feature on your phone is using the GPS location of your phone. It's not using the IP address. So using a VPN, you can IP address your phone to somewhere else, but you can't change at least not with a standard VPN feature. You can't change the actual GPS location of your phone. So no, it doesn't. I actually did try that myself. Tried to VPN my phone to France or somewhere and then still do the authentication, but it does use the actual GPS location of your phone for that fencing.
So we're out of time, but I just want to squeeze in this very last question. From Chris, he's wondering, how do you access the enabling of Microsoft Authentication app with MFA accounts? I may not have access to Azure. I just want to verify that.
Yes, you can absolutely do that.
There we go. Okay, that was a good short question. Thank you, Nathan, for an awesome presentation. Let's see. Looks like that's all the time we have for questions right now. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back at the top of the hour. Many thanks to Nathan O'Brien for a great presentation and to our sponsors for making this event possible. After the break, we'll be back with our second session, What's Ahead and Best Practices for Microsoft 365 in 2022, led by Microsoft MVP and Regional Director Joel Olson. So we're going to take a break now. And, quick reminder, if you're around for the third session, you've got to be here. We are giving away a pair of Bose noise-canceling headphones, but you must be present to win, so stay tuned. Back in a few. Welcome back, everyone, to today's summit, Microsoft 365, a look ahead to 2022. Just a reminder that this event was made possible by our four generous sponsors, Metallic, CoreView, Spanning, and Manage Engine. Many, many thanks to those very generous and absolutely necessary sponsors. Okay, I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of Application Development Trends, back to moderate what looks to be another terrific session, What's Ahead and Best Practices for Microsoft 365 in 2022. For this session, we've called on Joel Olson, a Microsoft MVP and Regional Director who is widely recognized as one of the world's most connected Microsoft community leaders. He was a key player in the launch of Microsoft's collaboration products, serving as the first dedicated SharePoint admin and architect for SharePoint Online. He left Microsoft in 2008 in search of a greater connection with the global community, and has since helped to kickstart Microsoft communities all over the world. A self-described travel geek, he has been to more than 175 UN countries, and he continues to coach and mentor community leaders across the globe. Needless to say, you're in for another great session. Take it away, Joel.
Thank you so much. I am just sharing my screen. We'll give it 1 second. You should be seeing my slides momentarily. And it's great to be here. Super excited to talk about the future and what's ahead for 2022. I'm just jazzed. I think that those of you who were at Ignite a few weeks ago, there were so many announcements, so many sessions, and so many different things. In fact, just this last week, I was in Las Vegas, where Microsoft is kind of doubling down on a lot of what's been happening and sharing more information. So when you talk about up-to-date, what's happening, what's going on, I was excited to see a bunch of stuff from Loop, which was included in my session. So I think there's a lot of interesting, exciting things here. I'll probably go a little bit quicker on that section, but there's a lot going on in Microsoft Teams. And let me tell you, the momentum of that product is so incredible. So you could say most of what I want to talk about today is Teams, and how Teams is really the front end for Microsoft 365. And I want to talk about all the relevant side of what's happening technology-wise in Microsoft Teams and what that means for us. I absolutely want to talk about Viva and what you should be thinking about and planning from a 2022 perspective with the Viva suite. We got a lot of those products GA just recently, and 2022, I'm sure there's going to be a lot around deployment and how you should be thinking about these things from a deployment perspective and rollout perspective. And what does it mean with Loop? I absolutely want to touch on things like Mesh for Teams, which was announced as well at Ignite. And there's a plethora of apps, and I'm kind of gonna go quickly across updates to SharePoint, Office, and other kind of related apps, including some new apps that were announced. And I do want to save some time for Q&A. We'll see how it goes, but it's going to be a tight hour. I've got a lot to talk about. So what I've tried to do is build a very visual experience here. So hopefully these animated images are coming through well. One thing that I would absolutely say that a lot of us have kind of been interested to note is that as Team gets better, PowerPoint as well has actually been behind the scenes been doing a lot of announcements or a lot of work to integrate with Teams and to improve our presentations, especially in the virtual space. So when you talk about the virtual meeting experience, you know, there's that fatigue of just looking at slide after slide, that ability to add video, but sometimes our head's right over the middle of the slide. How cool is it that we can actually put our head where we want it to be? So essentially being able to actually decide which slides we actually want to be presenting our face on, and then being able to cater that. So that's one of the PowerPoint Live enhancements. One of the more requested things is people don't want to see themselves on camera. So your ability to actually remove yourself. And another enhancement is this idea of being able to bring someone on the camera as well as being able to have deciding ahead of time who the presenters are. I know a lot of us who do this a lot, there's that kind of hustle at the beginning of a meeting where we have to decide who the presenters are, everybody's coming in as attendee, and then you have to essentially elevate that as well. There's a lot of enhancements coming to the mobile experience as well. There's some new things related to hybrid camera. And what I'm talking about here is, imagine we're back in this experience where some people are back at work and others are at home. And it's kind of this awkward experience of, okay, there's the conference room and everybody's looking at the conference room. But if you click hide panorama, now you're looking at everybody individually in the room as if they are remote. So it kind of equalizes the conversation. So you can actually look in panorama view or individually looking at faces. And there's some smart, intelligent AI aspects of that too, so that it recognizes who's speaking. But as well, you can still highlight and focus on the people that you want to from a viewing experience. And you can absolutely expect Teams to continue to improve the video experience. Speaking of the video experience, one of the kind of common requests is people don't necessarily want to come on camera. It might be they feel like they haven't put on their makeup or their hair, or, sometimes it's a bad hair day and you're like, I don't really want to come on camera. But there's so much value in being able to see expression. So this idea of being able to choose an avatar and the camera itself, instead of showing your face, you can have a representation of yourself in an avatar that does actually use the camera to pick up on expression. And even like being able to do hand movements and that kind of thing, it feels much more complete by being able to have those who choose to come on camera and those who choose to come on in kind of an avatar type of experience. And this is just the beginning. But the thought and the research is around that video fatigue. We still want to connect with our colleagues, but sometimes we don't want to just be on camera all for every single meeting. Other announcements, things like being able to bring somebody on screen. So even if there's one speaker or two speakers, and being able to switch who the speakers are and being able to show that visual experience. A lot really has been happening from a roadmap perspective with teams related to meetings and video and the whole presentation experience. And, we were just talking about this experience of the avatars. And this slide may start to get a little bit annoying with it repeating, but there's a few things to talk about here. This aspect of being able to have the physical space represented in a virtual way, especially with remote meetings, our ability to be able to kind of go into a very rich experience. And it's not just with headset, but the idea of being able to do headset, mobile, and desktop, where we can have richer 3D type of experiences where we can actually work on a whiteboard, go into a meeting room, and actually have this kind of digital twin simulated experience. And there's actually a new product experience called Mesh for Teams. And this is actually planned for 2022. Those of you who've been doing webinars, one of the things you'll notice with Teams for webinars is that if you're using the Teams meeting experience, which is what webinar is built on top of, there's not much of a green room experience. You want to be able to prepare, and so you try and do the lobby experience, and it ends up being kind of a mess at the beginning of the meeting when people are joining and they're hitting the lobby wall even after you've started the meeting, and you want that lobby to go away, but you all absolutely still want to have a space where you can talk with the other presenters. So one of the enhancements that's coming is green room. And this green room will then allow you to actually start the meeting when you want to, and without that end kind of consequential issue with live meetings. With webinar, essentially you can start the meeting and still individually you can leave if you want to without necessarily interrupting the meeting. So you can actually have that advanced green room type of experience. And I think this is a big, highly desired one for meetings and webinars especially. Now, I love this from an accessibility perspective, diversity perspective, and really when you start talking about flattening access for all employees. In a lot of global corporations, and even just multinational corporations, there's that problem of language. Well, how amazing is it, instead of just translating documents, if we can actually have conversations? And in these conversations, those who you're talking to can actually see your words, but translate into their own language. And I think this is, for me, this is one of the most anticipated. I get absolutely excited about being able to bridge cultural barriers and really be able to talk to colleagues that otherwise have been inaccessible. I've been able to see in Teams, as an example, being able to see in chat, being able to translate individual messages in kind of the thread. But how amazing will it be if we can actually have conversations where we can actually have intelligent conversations with language. I think this is super powerful. One of the features that was announced as well is how do we bridge this gap of personal and business, and this idea of being able to actually add it may be partners or people that are outside of your tenant, being able to have chats, kind of one-on-one chats with people outside the organization. And obviously I can expect that there'll be some administration side to this, but basically being able to add people on Teams, the personal side of it, being able to bring those users into your chat experience by phone number or email, which essentially makes it that much easier to find people. I think it kind of takes us back to the days of early Skype personal, where you could find somebody by their email or phone number, and then you had kind of that Skype personal experience. Well, how cool is it to be able to have that coming now for Teams, where it'll be that much easier to stay connected with our colleagues and friends, even after they leave the tenant, people outside the organization. One of the viewing experiences in Teams that's new is this new density view. So you'll notice that, you might be able to fit 5 messages or 2 or 3 messages on a screen when there's a lot of text. In the density view, essentially, it takes a lot of that white space out, and it's a personal choice to be able to essentially collapse it and view it in a much more dense screen. So for those who are actually looking to maximize screen space and be able to see what's been happening in kind of a more dense conversation even. There's 800 new emojis. I know a lot of people have been asking for emojis. Essentially, when you go to interact with a chat, you can click that plus and then see all the new emojis. And as I understand, there's even people who've built some extensibility around it, and you can even see along the bottom there that there's all sorts of categories for the emojis. So your ability to interact with content becomes that much more interactive. As well, there's actually diversity features that are actually coming into the emojis, where essentially, whether it's a clap or a thumbs up, instead of everybody having yellow thumbs, we can have a diversity of skin tones essentially in the emojis as well. That's something coming. In terms of the chats themselves and even messages and channels, our ability to actually schedule an announcement or schedule a post to our group or team, I imagine, especially from a comms team, this is going to be super powerful to be able to say, I want to post this, and especially if it's one of these cross-channel posts, being able to say, this is supposed to go out tomorrow at 8 a.m., and being able to pick a specific time to then post that message in a much more formal kind of manner out to broadcast to the diversity of teams. Teams continues to get new apps and experiences, and one of the things that is actually near and dear to my heart is the bringing SharePoint into Teams. And we'll definitely be talking more about Viva Connection. But this idea of our comms team being able to work on news and pages, and actually there's an app called SharePoint Pages, and it's getting a lot better in this new experience in 2022 with having richer SharePoint pages in Microsoft Teams. And I think the idea here is administrators, they may need to go into SharePoint, but what if we can minimize the need for people actually needing to go into SharePoint, because we can bring in our list data, we can bring in the file experience with full fidelity, and we can bring in news and pages and this very rich experience right into Teams, reducing the context switching and being able to kind of use Teams as a front end. And those who are managing teams and projects can essentially have all the data right there and not have to even leave the Teams experience. Now, talking about kind of that international and global aspects of things, I'm sure this has affected a lot of you. Have you ever been late to a meeting, or have you ever pinged somebody in Teams and then realized, oh, you know what, they're actually asleep? That schedule will actually benefit us there. But how cool is it to be able to just click on somebody's name and be able to see, oh, you know what, you're off by 4 hours. Their time is 10:28. Your time is, 6:28. Just as an example, I'm not sure that that's actually accurate here, but the idea of being able to see somebody's time zone and get kind of an example of just because they're online doesn't necessarily mean they're at work. So you can actually be from a perspective of reaching out and interrupting somebody, or, reaching out. It might be something business related, but maybe you don't necessarily want to wake them up. There's a lot going on in the third-party space as it relates to the Teams and the app space. I highly, highly encourage, in a 2022 perspective, you to look at that app catalog. In fact, there's a lot that's been going on with redesigning the app catalog from the ground up. And one of the kind of cool new features from an app catalog perspective is that it actually, your users can actually request apps. So if you're looking for a best practice, absolutely my best practice is you want to mature the Teams environment, you want to continue to, you need to come up with an app strategy. And with Microsoft in this new app store for Teams, one of the things you'll notice is people can actually vote and request for apps in the app store. And there are hundreds. And I know that these teams are getting overwhelmed. Your Microsoft 365, you're saying, hey, I need to forward all these connectors. I've got people who want to build apps here. How can I keep up with the third-party apps? Well, if you've got Atlassian, you've got Jira, you've got Confluence, you've got ServiceNow, you've got Workday, you've got all these things that are really pillar services organization. From a best practices perspective, highly encourage you to put in your sprint planning to actually evaluate those apps from a perspective of being able to support them in Teams. And it's actually going to really help people in building out their channels and teams with a much more enterprise and integrated experience. Now, you also should be thinking about the Center of Excellence, but a lot of those Center of Excellence features are now getting absolutely incorporated right into the admin experience. And you'll actually notice that Power Platform is now being looked at having Power Platform admin. And I know that that's something brand new and something that you should be thinking about as well. Is don't just think of Power Platform as a development tool. Think of it as how do we actually administer and govern and support the Power Platform. And especially if you're thinking about it from an Azure perspective, or maybe you haven't necessarily been thinking about it that way, highly encourage you to think about that from a governance and administration perspective. And this one kind of just, you're wondering, how did I get all that out of this particular slide? I do think that as there's more and more rich apps that are built for Teams by these companies like the Atlassian world, you're going to find more and more and more reasons to do it. And here's that reference to this new redesigned app store. You can actually see those things that are actually trending in your own organization. You can see what are the popular apps. When users go to install apps, they can see things by industry. They can essentially be able to see what's popular in the enterprise, in the organization. And if you're currently locking everything down, this is a huge missed opportunity in terms of the richness of Teams. Now, Viva. All right. Viva is definitely one of the things you should be planning for 2022. And Microsoft actually announced licensing called the Viva Suite, where you can actually get all of Viva for $8 a user a month. But let me just say as well, the Viva Connections is absolutely free. And as well, there's a number of these that kind of have a personal component to them, which is basically available to your users. You don't actually have to be licensed to be able to get some of those personal insights or even some of the freebie aspects of Viva Learning. So let me just kind of say, available now, Viva Connections, Viva Learning, Viva Insights, Viva Topics, and I've even already seen Ally popping up in the App Store, which is a recent acquisition. But there's new Viva modules that'll be coming in H2 of the next calendar year with promised integration with Viva and Teams, where Ally itself is currently available in the App Store now. And you're asking, what is Ally? Ally is organizational key indicators, and you might be able to see some of that as we move along. So the Viva Suite is now called Suite, and essentially each of these things are modules. I'm going to dive into these just a little bit, especially from a roadmap perspective. What you can expect from Viva Connections in 2022 is three major key focused areas. The feed, which is the one in the middle, which is focused on news and targeting, and you're going to see a lot richer interactions and full-on conversations, being able to see richer analytics, as well as those diversity emoticons, being able to interact with the news, again, with targeting, and there's new templates and a bunch of work that's going on there, both from a SharePoint perspective that enhances even those who aren't doing Viva, but something to definitely be aware of, that a lot of the investments in SharePoint, if you're looking for, hey, what's new in SharePoint, go spend some time with Viva Connections, because you'll actually notice that a lot of the work that's going into this next wave of what's happening in SharePoint is absolutely connected to Viva Connections. And this dashboard is absolutely brand new. It actually is available. The only way to get it is to go in and set your root home site. So if you go into the SharePoint admin, this is available now, been rolled out to the tenants. You go into the SharePoint admin, experience in Microsoft 365, and set your home site. And if you go set the home site, then you can go after, it takes a couple of hours, you come back, and you can actually add the dashboard to a page, and then you can, on that particular site, and then configure the dashboard. And the dashboard itself is very rich. And absolutely, this is a new investment area. This is where you can actually bring in things like tasks, your chats, your conversations, what's happening through the enterprise. These are things that are projects that are requesting your work. You know, there's a lot with the dashboards that are they're action cards that actually integrates with ServiceNow, Workday. There's the health check, which is a sample that Microsoft built. It's a great way to include things like company holidays. There's a lot more I could go into there. The third piece is the resources, which is essentially being able to provide global navigation to either your hubs or site navigation on your intranet, and essentially being able to expose resources that people can then navigate in Teams without leaving the app. Or in the mobile experience, it's being able to get to those resources without having to open or go somewhere else. Essentially, these Viva experiences essentially as well are about eliminating a lot of the context switching of jumping from this app to this app to this app. And Viva Connections as well is absolutely designed around being able to bring the enterprise experience of the teams, where Teams to date has primarily been focused on individual teams. You may have that org-wide team and been wondering what to do with it. Viva Connections, and let me just show you without spending too much time here. Here I am in Teams, and here's that Ally app I mentioned. Notice that I've got, here's Viva Connections, and absolutely you can have your own brand, your own icon. Just for simplicity and for being able to demonstrate this, I wanted to show the Viva Connections app here. From a 2022 perspective, absolutely be planning what you want to do with Viva Connections in bringing in SharePoint into the Teams experience. So here's my intranet, and obviously this is a mock-up. I can edit this page right in Teams. I have the ability to grab the link. I can go to the website in SharePoint and so on. Here's my little dashboard. In fact, there's some nice little widgets and web parts that Microsoft's given me to be able to kind of lay this out. But this is the new dashboard, and this is available now. So I've got an approvals one. I've got my tasks and my shifts, even some custom ones that I've actually built out. There's Yammer and stream integration here. Being able to bring these richer experiences right into Teams can be really valuable and powerful from a perspective of what's going on. And you can see there's other that kind of personalized and targeted experience from, say, news. You can absolutely be targeting this at because you're in this department, or being able to, bring richer experiences, again, without having to context switch and having to jump into the intranet. I just click a little targeted pinned app in my app bar. And as well, you can see we've got Viva Insights for kind of what's happening on the personal perspective, and Viva Learning for being able to get my modules. A lot of really great integration with LMS. And a lot of what 2022 is bringing these connectors for even more learning. So you're going to see more and more of the learning brought right into this experience. What do you want to learn today? Learn about. And as well, right in my teams themselves, my ability to be chatting with my team and say, hey, I want to share this new little, I want to share this learning thing with you as an example. So I could absolutely, you'll notice that Viva itself integrates right here in the chat experience. If I want to pull up a module for, say, something related to leadership or something like that, I've got all my really cool Viva content, as well as integration with whatever LMSs you want to pull into this. Those connectors are actually coming available, but technical content, HR-related content, whatever kind of learning modules you've actually got connected to Viva Learning. And there is an admin side to Viva Learning where you can actually manage what is in here. And you can add it as a tab into your team and being able to target courses and it's an ever-learning, enriching experience. Yeah, Viva Insights, this is the personal insights. There's also the team and division insights, anonymized. So you don't have to worry so much about, is somebody going to know when I'm working and that kind of thing. That's not what this app is designed around. Viva Insights helps us be more productive and can give us encouragement. Some of the new features that are coming for Viva Topics in 22 is the things I've really been waiting for. Integration into Outlook, Yammer, Search, and people profile cards. So essentially, the rich personal profile experience, being able to see who's working on what topics. As well, in Yammer, we have those topics, Yammer topics. Well, they're actually going to bring the topics together. So when you hashtag something in Yammer, it actually ties it back to the topics in Viva Topics. It's that enterprise Wikipedia, essentially, of organizational data based on topics. And if you want to use a topic, all you got to do once this is released is use a hashtag and then put in the topic name. If it's not an existing topic, it will actually recommend its topic to the admin to go and add and populate it. And as well, AI can populate it as well. So depending on how things are configured. If it's an existing one, say it's a project and you're just trying to share an update on the project, somebody's hearing about this project for the first time, they can find out all the team members of the project, they can see all the content that's contributed to it, any resources and sites and teams that they should belong to. A really, really powerful way of tying things together in a much more ontological manner. I mentioned Viva Learning and kind of its path and how there's a lot that's been happening there. Live today, you've already got Cornerstone, SAP, Saba, Skillsoft, Coursera, Pluralsight, Udemy, InfoSec, Josh Bernstein's Academy, edX, Go One. There's a bunch of them with more and more coming. Tons of modules, all of the catalog for Microsoft Learn, all of the catalog for Microsoft 365 training, and 125 modules from LinkedIn Learning with your ability to purchase even more. I mentioned Ally, which was the acquisition, the newest module that's planned for Viva. And basically that is the organizational key, I forget what the R stands for, but essentially some really cool reporting and dashboards for across the organization. Now, those of you who are kind of looking for some best practices here for 2022, highly encourage you to look at your information architecture. You may still be doing SharePoint separate from Teams. Highly encourage you to look at this idea of a top-down. It's time to start drawing the pyramid again. What's that Viva Connections root home site at the top of the pyramid? What are our hubs? One of the things that's in preview right now is hub of hubs and being able to do hub structures where you can have child hubs and parent hubs. And even when you start talking about Microsoft 365 and Teams and Team sites versus Microsoft Teams, well, you can actually build out this idea of, hey, let's actually start to categorize and add sensitivity labels to our data. What are the sites that are public? Wouldn't it be cool to add those to hubs so we can actually roll up our news, which also means we need our strategy around official news. So there's a lot of things around aggregation and content and activity and being able to really start to roll things up for our users so they don't have to click a bunch of different places. You can actually roll up tasks, roll up activities, roll up your search. That ought to be something you're thinking a lot about, is how do we get ahead of this and start building out a powerful structure so that we can actually properly roll things up. And for those things that are private and sensitive, how do we actually keep those obscure or actually properly managed so that those who are members of them can find them, but everybody else doesn't necessarily see them? And this is one that I don't have a lot of time to go through this, but I put this one together that's like, what should you be doing? What are the things you should be doing? Not just letting the service run itself, but, hey, let's prepare the intranet for this new 2022 world. Let's get modern. Let's do our root site. Let's set our news as official. Let's look at this new app bar that was released in 2021 and look at the new mega nav. Look at the header footer. Looking at our user experience. What are the site designs that should be firing off? Are we actually doing real branding? Well, Microsoft's done a ton with the lookbook that are samples that you can actually use to build out your own structure and brand for both the SharePoint world, but also thinking about things from this Microsoft 365 group. And I would highly encourage you to be thinking about that from a provisioning perspective, as well as archiving, exploration, deprovisioning. And your future, and kind of looking at the 2022 roadmap, should absolutely be looking at how are we going to roll out these Viva modules? How are we going to get Viva Connections so that it is the front door and starts being the top of the pyramid to aggregate our information from a search perspective? There's a ton of improvements to search. We talked about the people profile enhancements that are coming. Well, there's a ton of connectors that released in 2021. The acronym features are totally available now and integrating with Viva Topics, the taxonomy work that's been done in 2021, a lot that you can be doing with your departments and locations, and thinking about that from a dynamic group perspective in Azure AD from a targeting perspective. And Microsoft even has an article around setting up Viva Connections. Make sure it's not the PowerShell one. That was the one released earlier in the year. You want to look for the article on setting up Viva Connections, which focuses on setting the home site. Because once you set your home site, then you can essentially get the app in Teams. But this kind of 8-step process is what you're looking to do to set up Viva Connections, and think about this from a preparation perspective as well. What should you be thinking about from a targeting perspective and preparing your content? When you go to add your root home site, it's kind of saying, is this a communication site? Is it a modern site? So there's some prep you may need to do for your existing home site. Loop was covered in the last session. I'm not going to spend much time on Loop, but essentially there's 3 major efforts in Loop, something called Loop Components, Loop Pages, and Loop Workspaces. These Loop Pages are actually in SharePoint. So you're looking for, hey, what are some of the new SharePoint enhancements? Go look at Loop Pages. Hey, you're wondering, oh, is there any Loop integration with Teams? Look at Loop Components. You're looking at, hey, how do I organize these things? Look at Loop Workspaces. So anyway, there's a lot that's going around with Loop. And here I'm just going to kind of show a couple of these screenshots as we move along. But this idea of being able to update and work on things simultaneously with our colleagues in a component fashion, this used to be referred to as fluid. There's still a lot of the fluid framework side of being able to do this from a development perspective. But now we kind of have the first app that Microsoft's building. I think it was also called Live Components in preview. But essentially, this new Microsoft Loop is super powerful from a perspective of being able to work together on something and not having to even leave chat. We can actually do this on the fly. You may also see if people don't have access to it, they're actually going directly to the Loop page. And here's our Loop page where everybody's working, and we're sorting things and working on things together. And you can see that kind of rich emoji kind of experience. Again, this is kind of coming from the video, kind of snippet from the video, but you get the idea. Even integration with business data. You've got your business data. How cool is it to be able to bring and build cards right out of Dynamics 365, and then have your team members be able to update their status on their projects or update information that may need to be updating and that kind of thing. So much super powerful being able to bring our business data into these components. And here's your Loop workspace. And as an example, we're kind of looking at things. Nav on the left, you can see who's working on which components, on which, and then being able to see those Loop pages and components organized and sorted with our data. And you can see where the people are working and editing and so on.
Well, it looks like that's all the time we have for this session. Many thanks to Joel Olson for a great presentation, and to our sponsors, Metallic, CoreView, Spanning, and Manage Engine for making this event possible. We're going to take a short break here, but we'll be back in just a bit for our third session, Hottest Third-Party Products, led by Becky Nagel, Vice President of Web and Digital Strategy for 1105 Media's Converged 360 Group, which is where I hang my hat. Now would be a great time to check out those extra resources on your console provided by our sponsors. And remember, during the last session, we will be giving away a pair of Bose noise-canceling headphones. But you must be present to win, so stay tuned. Back in a few.
Welcome back to our third session. Becky, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us here on this Friday. Serious apologies about our audio issues earlier. Hopefully you can hear me now. If you can hear me, can you just type something in the little box so we know you can hear me? I'd really appreciate that. So please let me know. But I think we have it working now. Again, our apologies that this happened, but sometimes it's real life. You guys at least know it's live. We're doing it live. So we are here. Thank you so much to Joel. Thank you so much to John. We did get your questions. I see everyone responding. Hear you loud and clear. Thank you guys so much. Your patience with us today is so appreciated. Thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate you. What we are going to do is, if you have questions for Joel, we know you didn't get them answered. We're going to go ahead and get those over. Also, that session will be fixed on the replay. You're going to get a replay email to you within 24 to 72 hours. Probably going to be on the 72 hours by this time, guys, because we're going to have to do some edits. So we're going to edit everything, fix everything, make it right, and then we'll send this out to you so you won't miss the end of Joel's presentation. We were recording it. We got the audio on our side, the master side. We'll get it all out to you. There were some questions we actually did get the answers to, and then we didn't. So again, thank you so much for sticking with us. And with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on. But before we do, again, you will get a recording. Sorry, that is my phone. Live stuff going on here, guys. Thank you so much. Again, please stay on to the very end of the session if you can. Number one, because you need to be on at the very end, because that's when we do the drawing for the Bose noise-canceling headphones. What we do is it's a random drawing. You don't have to do anything, but you have to be on the call, because we do a random drawing of everybody on there. It's a random number generator. If you're not on the call, you don't have a number assigned to you. So you do need to be on the call at the end when we do that drawing. So please stay on to the very end. Number two, we really want you to stay on to the end, because at the very end we do a survey, and the editors look at every single response that you have. They want to know your feedback. We have been doing so many of these summits. They're really popular. We want to make them popular. We want to make them more popular and more useful for you. So please give your honest feedback. Let us know what you think so we can keep making these better and hopefully without as many technical issues. So, and then finally, speaking of future events, we really, really want to thank our sponsors, Metallic, CoreView, Spanning, and Managed Engine. Here's the thing, guys. We cannot bring you these without doing this. We can't do it without the sponsors. They are the ones that let us bring you this for free. They're underwriting all the content. They believe in the community, and that's why they're doing it. So thank you so much, and please show your thanks to them. Please download those resources. Please go ahead and go on and sign up for those demos, reach out to the companies on Twitter, follow them, do everything you can to really show them that you appreciate them and they're supportive of our community, because that's what it allows us to do this. So thank you again to Metallic, CoreView, Spanning, and Managed Engine. Thank you again for all of you for bearing with us. And with that, I'm really thrilled to announce the first speaker for our session. It's Brad Kirby. He's the Director of Product Management for SaaS Applications at Metallic. And Brad, please take it away.
All right. Hey, Becky, thanks very much. Can we do a quick sound check? Do you hear me okay?
I hear you great. You sound really, really good.
Okay, super. Hopefully everyone on the line is able to hear me okay. And as Becky mentioned, my name is Brad Kirby. I'm the Director of Product Management at Metallic, focused on the SaaS application space. So our team is responsible for data management as a service for Office 365, for Salesforce, for Dynamics, and of course Metallic is able to protect a whole host of workloads that we'll talk about here in a second. As we switch to the next slide here, some of these statistics are probably ones that you've heard before, but I think they bear repeating. if you're an Office 365 user today or customer today, you're part of a large community of over 250 active users. But all organizations need to be thinking about what are the risks related to managing that environment, and what are my responsibilities as an end user or as a consumer of Office 365 in terms of protecting that data. And we all know that ransomware and cyber attacks are on the rise. Statistic here is cybercrime is up by 400%. And these cyber attacks can often result in millions or tens of millions of dollars in lost revenue for organizations when they occur. And it's not only about external bad actors. You also, organizations need to be wary about threats from inside the organization. And in fact, we know that the majority of malicious attacks actually occur from inside the organization as opposed to outside of the organization. And then the last thing here is sometimes data loss is not really even a function of malicious activity at all, but it's just a function of people making mistakes in the organization. And the challenge here is when you've made that mistake, how do you quickly identify it? How do you quickly understand what's changed? And how do you quickly recover from that accidental deletion? So what we're going to do now is we're going to quick start things off with a poll. And I think what I need to do here, I'm gonna submit this, and what we're going to do is we're going to wait for everyone to fill this in. So the question here is, when it comes to protecting SaaS app data, including Office 365, whose responsibility is it? Is it the cloud service provider? Is it the customer being responsible or partially responsible along with the cloud service provider? Or is the customer solely responsible for protecting data within Office 365 and typically other SaaS applications? So let's see. We'll wait for folks to fill this in. I think this is submitted correctly. And we'll go here. Okay, so everyone should be able to see the results. So again, the question is, when it comes to protecting SaaS app data, including Office 365, whose responsibility is it? We have just under 10% saying the cloud service provider is responsible. Sounds reasonable, right? It is the cloud after all. We have the majority of folks here saying that the customer is partially responsible along with the cloud service provider. And then the final one here is we are solely responsible. So let's look and see what Microsoft says here by taking a look at their shared responsibility model. And one of the great things about the cloud is the cloud provider is responsible for a number of elements of the solution, right? They're responsible for physical security. They're responsible for the host infrastructure, for networking, application controls, maintaining availability of that application. But if you go up to the top here, what Microsoft and other vendors will say is actually it is the end user, it is the customer that is responsible for protecting their data and maintaining the integrity of their data in the cloud. So Microsoft is capable of taking care of a large number of things, but they are not going to take responsibility for your data. And in fact, if you look at the right-hand portion of the slide, this is a tweet that Microsoft had sent out a while back. They actually recommend that if you are an Office 365 or you're a Dynamics user, that you should have a third-party data protection solution in place to help you recover from accidental deletion or even malicious deletion that happens within your environment. So the takeaway from this is, number one, you are responsible for your data. Number two, Microsoft is really advocating that organizations leverage a third-party data protection service for their Office 365 data. And so why? Why is it that Microsoft is saying native controls aren't good enough? Well, there are a couple of reasons here. One is, in most cases, when you protect your data, you want to make sure that those backup snapshots are isolated from the main workload. So with a third-party data protection solution, you're going to be able to take advantage of air gap solutions. In most cases, the storage that you'll see is immutable storage. And in most cases, that storage should be spread across multiple data centers to give you that extra protection. The other piece that is often raised here is the fact that data retention within the recycle bin is somewhat limited, and for many organizations, that retention period is not long enough. So third-party data protection solutions give you the ability to extend that retention period beyond what Microsoft provides in their default solution. The other thing, if you've ever worked with a recycle bin, is it's not really optimized for search. So if I've performed some accidental deletions, how do I quickly understand what's changed and surgically replace the set of information that I need, as opposed to doing a bulk restore that may have unintended consequences for my environment? And then last but not least, you really need to be able to understand what is the health of your backups. How often have I been backing up? Are all of my mailboxes backed up successfully? Are all of my OneDrive shares backed up successfully? You want to have visibility to that telemetry that allows you to understand the health of your particular environment. So let's get on to Metallic. And how does Metallic help you augment the Office 365 environment and give you the data protection capabilities that you need to ensure that if you do have some kind of data loss, you're able to recover from that quickly and seamlessly. So one of the nice things about Metallic is today we're here to talk about Office 365, and we'll talk a little bit more about the capabilities that we deliver in that space. But Metallic is actually a broad portfolio of capabilities that spans SaaS applications like the ones that you see here for Office 365, Dynamics, Salesforce, but we also provide a full set of capabilities for hybrid cloud data protection, so VM and Kubernetes, Metallic database backups that include SQL Server, SAP HANA, and Oracle, and file and object backup as well. But that's not it. We also provide cloud storage that organizations can use if they're looking to reduce their on-premises storage footprint. We provide data protection for endpoints. So for those of us that are working from home today or work in companies with a largely remote workforce, which has been, I think, just about everyone over the last year and a half, that endpoint protection is really important. And then we also provide, as a free service, Active Directory backup and recovery that covers both your on-premises AD as well as your Azure AD environment. And then specifically, we, as I mentioned before, we provide that support for Office 365. And, as a larger organization as Commvault, which provides support for the cloud environment as well as on-premises environment, we have been recognized by Gartner for the last 9 years as a leader. And Commvault has received the highest scores in all of the categories for data protection in the last Gartner Magic Quadrant submission. And as we mentioned before, Office 365 is a critical workload. Office 365, as you know, has Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Teams, and OneDrive. It's really important that you are able to protect all of those workloads, and Metallic enables you to support each one of those. In particular, with Teams being on the rise with remote workforce, it's really important that all elements of that Teams environment is protected effectively, including the Teams, all of the channels within Teams, your wikis, all of the files that you're sharing within that Teams environment. All of that needs to be protected. And of course, we provide industry-leading data protection for Exchange Online and OneDrive and SharePoint, and provide you with not only the ability, of course, to back all of those up, but do the granular restore of mailboxes, items within your mailbox, specific files within OneDrive and your SharePoint environment. And of course, the proof is really in who is using it and what is the experience that they've had with the solution. And Harrell Group is a great example of a customer that has been a long-time Commvault customer and a more recent Metallic customer. In particular, Harrell is an insurance company that operates in Israel. They have over 10 million customers today, and they provide a wide portfolio of insurance, from life insurance to automotive to many other sorts of insurance. And their particular challenge was they had used Commvault for a long period of time to protect their on-premises infrastructure, from their SQL database infrastructure to their physical and virtual servers, to even their AS400 systems. They had been using Commvault for 7 years up until that period of time. But like many organizations, they were starting to pivot to the public cloud, and Office 365 was one of the first workloads that they decided to adopt, and they needed a solution that was going to help them cover their on-premises workloads as well as their workloads in the cloud. So they wanted a single solution, and they really needed to be able to deploy their solution for Office 365 backup as quickly as possible, right? They didn't want to have to set up additional infrastructure, and they knew that if they chose an on-premises solution, they would probably have to hire additional staff in order to get that work done. So they continue to leverage Commvault Complete on-premises, but for Office 365, they decided to move forward with Metallic. They were able to quickly back up their entire Office 365 environment within a number of weeks. And really the key item here is the solution really paid for itself in the sense that they were able to purchase the Metallic solution for the same price that it would have taken them to hire additional staff to support an on-premises solution, not to mention the additional infrastructure that would need to support that. So they have been very satisfied with the solution. They've started out with 1,000 mailboxes. That's going to move to in excess of 5,000 mailboxes over time. And, they've been very satisfied with both the performance and the security of the solution. And finally, what presentation wouldn't end with without some kind of promotion? So what we'd like to do is we'd like to make sure that everyone is aware of the fact that with Metallic, you will have a limited time offer to buy 3 users for any of the workloads that we see here: Metallic Office 365, Dynamics 365, and Endpoint. Again, buy 3 users, get 1 free. We'd definitely like to speak to you about Metallic and see if we can get you started with a trial and moving ahead with a production deployment. So with that, I think we are going to head into the Q&A session.
Yes, we definitely have questions, Brad, but before we do, let's talk a little bit about how people can take advantage of that offer. Should they just mention that when they, because I know they can go to metallic.io, and you guys have buttons for both scheduling a demo and trying it for free. How do they take advantage of that offer you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. If you are working with a Metallic sales rep, of course, mention it to your sales rep. I'm sure they're going to mention it to you as well. And of course, Metallic is working with its partner community. So if you engage with a Commvault or Metallic partner, they will have all the information that you need about the promotion.
Okay, great. And we do have some questions. Guys, get your questions in. If we don't have time to answer Brad, we'll get them over to Brad. But we do have some questions that have come in. The first one is from Saeed, and his question is, I'm going to combine 2 of the ones he had. Is it easy to link the storage to environments, and can you talk a little bit about throughput?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about Metallic is everything is included in one price. So there's not a question of I have to procure storage that is going to serve as the backing store for the Metallic backups. That's all included as part of the Office 365 solution, and the storage is unlimited, right? So you're not restricted in the amount of storage that you consume. And then in terms of throughput, of course, that's going to vary based on the environments. Microsoft will, from time and again, have throttling that goes in place. But what we've been seeing is for SharePoint, for example, about 1.5 to 2 terabytes a day in throughput, and similar sorts of performance for other workloads. And there's actually quite a bit of emphasis put on that. We've continued to improve that over time, both by working directly with the Microsoft product teams to ensure that we're using the most performant APIs, and also parallelizing the backup process and the process of or the download process and the process of committing data to the backups.
Great. Another question that's coming from Robbie: does this solution give the option of air-gapped backups?
So by default, all of the backups are air-gapped. The Metallic storage, by definition, is air-gapped and immutable. And one of the things that we often get asked is, well, is it the fact that Metallic runs in Azure, is that a problem because it's an Office 365 workload? And the reality is that the Office 365 data centers and the Azure data centers are different. And then the Metallic storage is actually striped across multiple data centers. So it's air-gapped as well as highly resilient.
Great. And Brad, I know we already talked about offer. Go to metallic.io to get more information. But just and again, we'll get the rest of the questions to you, but we are running on time. Do you have any parting advice? Because you do this day in and day out dealing with people with backups. So
any advice? I mean, I think the primary advice that I have is many organizations think, hey, I'm moving to Office 365. I'm moving to the cloud. That means that, somebody else is kind of taking care of the solution. And I think it's really important to understand what that shared responsibility model entails, and, make sure that you have an understanding of your responsibility and put the correct solutions in place to make sure that your data, which is running your company, is always protected.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad, for being with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.